Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I have my April wrap-up. This month I did do a mid-month wrap-up as well, so I will link that down below if you haven't seen it yet. And so let's just get into the books. Unfortunately, with the second half of this month, I didn't have very many books that I actually liked. There was maybe like one on this list, or maybe two, that I can honestly say were like really good books. I have 8 books to talk about today. The first one was A Kiss for a Kiss by Helena, and this is the 4th and final book of the All In series, which is the spin-off of the Pucked series. And I really like this series, I really like these books. This one was just a little off for me. I think I gave this one 3 or 3.5 stars because I didn't find that it was really a romance. It follows a sort of like almost the parents of another couple from the previous book, so like the dad of the girl from the previous book and the mom of the guy from the previous book, who end up getting together. They're both like sort of single parents and they end up getting together, but most of this book just sort of deals with this woman becoming pregnant by accident when she is a little bit older. I believe she's like mid-40s, and sort of the whole book is her like being concerned about that and the risks with that, and like her doctor's appointments and them sort of figuring out what they're gonna do when she has this baby and stuff. And I found that there was like pretty much no romance involved. It was literally all just about like what this woman was gonna do now that she was pregnant at her age. And because of that, I wasn't really super interested. I do sort of get the point of the book, but I felt like it leaned more towards women's fiction than a romance, because there wasn't any like dating or him trying to woo her or literally anything like that. She was already pregnant like right at the beginning of the book, and the whole book just followed her pregnancy, and I don't know, I just found that kind of boring. It wasn't really my thing, but like I said, I do get like what the author was trying to do with that, but just definitely wasn't my favorite in the series. Next was Snow by Sophie Lark. This is part of the Underworld series, and honestly I haven't been loving this series. This book follows a guy named Snow who is like an underground fighter basically, and he ends up in this like big tournament with all these like mafia bosses that are kind of running it, and he meets this girl there who is working for one of the mafia bosses because her dad got into all kinds of debt with him, and she offers to repay the debt by working as a doctor for him because she has just finished medical school. And so she's working for him, and she ends up like stitching up all these guys that are fighting, and so she meets Snow obviously, and things go from there. I didn't love this one. I gave this one 3 stars as well, I think, mostly because I just have no interest in like fighting. Like I really just, I don't know. This was so detailed about the fights and I just didn't care. There was so much information about him being in the ring. There were literally whole chapters dedicated to his fights with nothing to do with the girl, and I was just like bored because I just had no interest in any of that. And so because of that, I think this one really just like didn't do it for me. I found it dragged on because of those scenes, and I didn't love it. But I probably should have seen that coming because it was a like fighter romance. But it's just, I don't know, sometimes I read those and they're fine because like there's just like little snippets of like, oh, he won the match and whatever, and I'm good with that. But this was like incredibly detailed fight scenes that I was just like, I didn't care. So didn't love this one either. Next was The Worst Best Man by Sosa, and this one, honestly, I can barely remember what this one was about. I listened to this one as an audiobook and I found I got really confused as to what was even going on. I know that it involves a girl whose husband, or I guess not, like fiance, decides he doesn't want to marry her like right before the wedding, and all these years she has sort of been told that it was this fiance's brother who told him, hey, you shouldn't get married, and that's what caused him to back out. So she's kind of had all these issues with the brother and the ex-fiance, but she ends up having to work with them, and I didn't really understand this part. For some reason they were both, she had to work with one of the brothers and the other brother was going to work with another person, and they were kind of competing for some like contract or something. I don't know. But I found this one just like, I didn't really care. Again, like I don't know if it's just me, but I found like so many of these books I read this month were just boring. And this was one, and this one in particular made me realize why people kind of bash traditionally published books, I guess. And like, I'll be the first to admit, like, there are definitely traditionally published books that I absolutely love, so this does not apply to everything, but for a long time when I was first getting into BookTube, I couldn't figure out why people sort of talked down on traditionally published books and why they like really hyped up indie books. And I feel like this book made me realize why, is that this book was just like nothing different. It was like tropes that have been done before, characters that have been done before, situations that have been done before. Like, nothing about this book was unique, really. It was kind of like they took almost like there was a drop down box. This is sort of how I imagined it for each thing. Like, okay, like drop down box for your main character, select this person and like whatever. But like from other books like that were traditionally published, it just seemed very normal and like nothing unique or interesting about it to me. I know some people like really love this book. I don't see what they see, obviously, but it was okay. I think I gave this 3 stars. Like I said, I can't even really remember what happened in this one. I had just like no interest at all. Next, I read Little Lies by H. Hunting, which is Helena Hunting, obviously, and this one I actually did really, really love. This is part of, I'm not sure if this series has a name yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a series. This is the spin-off to Pucked and the All In series, so this is now their kids, and I loved this book so much. This book follows Lavender, who is the daughter of the couple from the first Pucked book, and Cody, who is the son of the first couple in the All In series. And they have sort of grown up together as best friends, but there sort of comes a point where they split apart and don't see each other as much, and he sort of believes that he is bad for her, like he shouldn't be around her, but he's still best friends with her brother. And so he's still around a lot and he just kind of stays away from her. He starts being a jerk to her. There's like a little smidgen of like bully romance in this one. And he just like wants her like as far away from him as possible because he doesn't think he's good for her. And she is sort of convinced of the opposite, and she's like super mad that he is such a jerk to her all the time. And it sort of goes from there. It's like college, new adult. It is hockey. He's a hockey player. All the parents are hockey players, and I loved that you got to see so much of the parents from the other books, because obviously like I love those books as well. So getting to see all the parents involved in this book too was really cool, and I just thought this one was really good. I really, really liked it. Obviously gave it 4.5 stars. Definitely like one of my new favorite books. Next, I read Roman by Sophie Lark, which is again part of the Underworld series, and honestly I forgot I even read this one until I went to write this list for this video. But this one follows this is like sort of, it starts out where like in high school he was her bully, but like they're not in high school in the book, and I don't think they ever really flash back to it, but they acknowledge that he was like a jerk to her in high school, mostly because he was just like mad that she wasn't falling all over him like all the other girls. And now that I think about it, there is a scene back when they're in high school, at least one, where you like see him being a jerk to her. And so she has just like grown up now, they're older, she has nothing to do with him, and she's gotten a job as a reporter, and he is like this big like mafia boss dude, and she ends up getting assigned to writing an article about his new casino opening. And so she's obviously spending a lot of time with him, but she's also spending a lot of time with one of his competitors, and so there's like some jealousy stuff that goes on there, which I really liked. This one I think I gave 4 stars to. I did like it a little bit more than the first 2, but still not like an all-time favorite. It was good, but like I said, I honestly forgot I had even read it, so I guess that's not great. Next was The Coppersmith Farmhouse by Devney Perry, and when I say this book was a letdown, that is a massive understatement. I cannot believe how much I hated this book, to be honest. I gave this 2 stars, and honestly, the 1 extra star I gave it above 1 star was solely because I liked the small town vibes, and that was it. I hated the guy in this book with every fiber of my being. He is like hands down to me the worst book boyfriend I've ever read. Like, he was just awful to her the entire book. There were so many red flags, it wasn't even funny. I could do like a whole rant review on this book, to be honest. I almost thought about doing it. But he starts out the book where this girl has moved to this small Montana town, which is like very common for Devney Perry books, I find. And she's moved to this town with her daughter. And her daughter's 4. And she's just living there, planning to, you know, stay away from everything. She inherits this house that she moves into from this older man who she was sort of taking care of when he was older, obviously. She's a nurse, and so she met him at the hospital, and they just kind of started joking back and forth, and she ended up going to visit him after he got out of the hospital. He's now passed, obviously, and he leaves her like a note saying, hey, I have this house in Montana, it's yours. And he leaves a note saying, too, that he has hired this guy named Brick for the last, I don't know, 20 years or whatever, to take care of the property. And he's like, give him $50,000 when you get there. He won't take it, but make sure he takes it. And she's like, okay, I guess I'm moving to small town Montana to inherit this house. And she goes, and immediately when she gets there, she starts working at the hospital, and she meets this town sheriff, Jess, who is the biggest jerk on the planet from the moment she meets him. And I am not someone who's like picky with my book boyfriends. Like, I can get behind a jerk if he's got some sort of like, I don't know, soft spot for the girl, or if he has some sort of evolution where he becomes not so much of a jerk, or just like literally any remotely redeemable quality. And this guy just had none of those things. Like, from the moment he meets her, he's a jerk. He yells at her daughter because he spills a drink on himself, like full out, like cussing both of them out and yelling at them and whatever because he dropped a drink on himself. And there are multiple times in this book where he starts yelling at her for things that aren't even her fault or are just like stupid little things that did not require him to be yelling at her. And there was never a moment where I felt like, wow, this guy is so great. Like, I'm glad she found him, because he was just absolute trash, like, the entire book. And there was like one point towards the end of the book where I actually thought, like, okay, maybe this is where he's being redeemed. Like, he seems nice, he seems to care about them, like, maybe this is us finally moving forward. And then they, like, put this scene in the book that I still, for the life of me, cannot figure out. I referenced this in my review on Goodreads, where she's hosting this, like, sleepover for her 4-year-old and some of her friends. And so there's all these little girls running around, and he's just, like, thinks it's, like, the worst thing on the planet that these girls are there and, like, annoying him with their singing and whatever. And he's, like, a real jerk about it, but then he's like, oh yeah, I want kids, but he's, like, can't even handle these kids in his house for one night. And he comes in the kitchen, and she's like, oh, he's in a mood, and he, like, literally just stands there and chugs 2 beers, and she's like, what the heck is this guy doing? Like, he just got home, and he's, like, standing here chugging beers in the kitchen. And then he just stands there, and they, like, I can't believe they even put this in the book. She's like, oh yeah, he chugged the 2 beers, and then let out, like, the world's biggest burp, and was like, I'm going outside, or whatever. And they literally say in the book that she's standing there with her jaw dropped, and then it just, like, moves on to something else. Like, they totally disregard that that even happened. And I cannot figure out what benefit that was supposed to serve to the story other than to make you think this guy was terrible. Like, none of that made me go, wow, like, he's so charming. Like, it was all awful. He was terrible to both of them the entire book. And yet we were still supposed to be rooting for them. Like, that, I don't know, there was, like, some major disconnect in this where, like, it just didn't make sense to me. He would tell her what to do all the time. He told her they were dating. He was like, we're dating now, and she's like, I don't even know if I like you, and he's like, I don't care, we're dating. And then he's like, I'm doing this, and she'd be like, no, you're not, and he's like, no, I'm doing it, and she's like, I can't believe you walk all over me, blah, blah, blah. And the amount of times she, like, gave him the silent treatment, or was like, I'm fine, all, like, passive-aggressively, was, like, too many to count, to be honest. Like, they had the same, like, style argument at least 6 times in this book, where she would just, like, pout after he got his way, and he would be like, oh, I'm sorry, and then do it again, like, 2 chapters later. And it was just, like, so stupid. Like, it was, the whole thing was just so stupid. And, like, I don't know. I don't know what this book was supposed to be. I was, like, really angry when I was reading this book, and I was telling my mom about it, because I was like, you would not believe the guy in this book. And I was saying the only way I think this would have made sense is if the 2 of them had to be together for, like, the sake of inheriting the house or something. Like, there would have had to be something forcing them together for me to understand why she put up with him for as long as she did. Because, like, to me, there's no reason why she should have been with him at all. And It really drove me nuts when she started being like, oh, I don't deserve him, like, he could do so much better than me, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, girl, no, like, you could do so much better than him. Like, he is terrible. And that just, like, really started bothering me when she started doing that, too, because I was like, man, like, not only is she, like, in this crappy relationship, but she thinks he's too good for her. Like, oh my god, I can't even with this book. I really can't. I could talk about this book for 3 hours, honestly. But I hated it. Obviously, I don't know that I'm going to continue on with the series because I hated it as much as I did, and I haven't seen any ratings for like the other books that would lead me to believe that they're any better than this first one, which sucks because I loved the Indigo Ridge, like the Eden series by Devney Perry, but this one was just like totally off the mark. After those sort of not so great books, I was just like in a mood where I was like, I need something that I have read before that I know is going to be good and is not going to disappoint me like most of the books this month did. So I picked out Bad For You by Abby Glines. I listened to the audiobook of this. I love this book. I don't know what it is about this one specifically. It is book 7, I think, in the Seabreeze series, but you could totally read it on your own. But the whole series is pretty cute. But this one in particular just like speaks to me on a different level. It follows a girl who was adopted by a priest, I think, or like some kind of preacher when she was a kid. And she sort of lived in this house with this priest and his wife for her whole life. And the wife was constantly like abusive towards her, didn't like her, told her she was ugly all the time, and just like treated her like crap basically. And this girl sort of grew up believing that. Like she genuinely thinks she's ugly and that like people don't want to be around her because she would go to the church and because her dad, like her adopted dad, was the priest and his wife was there. Like obviously they were like telling all of these other people like what a horrible person she was, and so like the church kids didn't want to hang out with her and stuff, and like everyone was just like mean to her. Like the adults would take their kids away from her when she was trying to play with them and things, and she was just like always alone and sort of had like this really depressing childhood. And she turns 18 and the pastor's wife has died, and the pastor gives her a car and says, I got like an apartment set up for you in this town where my friend works as a priest at another church. You can go there, you can work for him, and you can go to school and live in this apartment. Now that you're 18, like basically you're on your own. So he gives her like the money to do that, and then he's like, you're on your own after that. So she goes and she moves into this apartment building, and her neighbor is Crit, who is, you see him a lot in the other books. He is the lead singer of a band that plays at the sort of local pub or bar or whatever it is, and she is his neighbor now, so he is making a ton of noise all the time because they're always partying, and this complex is like known for parties, but she obviously didn't know that because the pastor like set her up with this apartment. And she's just like so like naive, I guess, and like she genuinely believes that she's like a horrible person that no one wants to be around, and this guy just like cannot stop hanging out with her, and he knows he shouldn't be with her because he's like a rock star that's like sleeping with all these girls all the time and like has done all kinds of things, and he's like, I shouldn't be anywhere near this girl, like she's super like reserved and like obviously has no real life experience basically, and but he can't stop himself from hanging out with her, so they're just kind of hanging out as friends for a long time before it sort of obviously builds into more. But I just love this book so much. I feel like it's so sweet, and I'm like so glad that like Crit got that, because you see sort of Crit's troubles throughout the other book, and I think like Blythe was exactly who he needed. I love this book so much. Like honestly, it's so good. And lastly, I read Dom by Sophie Lark, which is again from the Underworld series. This one follows Dom, obviously, who sort of accidentally kidnaps this girl. He basically is running weed on a boat, and the cops find out where he's planning on docking. So they end up bailing from the boat, and the cops seize the weed. And he's like, okay, I am gonna get this back from them. And so he plans this whole like takedown of the police department or whatever, where he knows that on this specific night they're all going to this gala, so he's like, okay, I'm gonna break in, steal my weed back, and get out of there. And while they're stealing the weed, they find out that the police commissioner, I think it is, like the head police dude, I don't know, has left his daughter at the police station, and they're like, well, this is convenient. So they sort of decide on the fly that they're going to kidnap her to like send a message to him, but they end up dropping her like on the doorstep of this event that they know the guy's at, just as like a warning to him of like, look at what we could have done. But then this guy, Dom, obviously keeps thinking about this girl, and he ends up sort of making it so that they meet again, but she doesn't know who he is because they were all wearing masks and like sort of shielded, I guess, when they were robbing the police station. So she doesn't know who he is when they meet, but they obviously start getting closer, and then she starts to notice little things like that he's probably mafia, and she is like picking up on things here and there, but she's got like her own secrets going on. This one was like pretty good. I would say this one maybe was my favorite of the series. This one I think I gave 4 stars. But I will say I do think this might be the last one in the series I read because I'm just not vibing with a lot of the books. I wanted to read this one before I read The Kingmakers because I know it follows their kids, but I think at this point I just don't really care about their backstories enough to keep pushing myself to read more of these books. So I think this may be the last Underworld book that I read. If you have read the series and the rest like gets significantly better, please let me know because then maybe I will continue. But for right now, I am not planning on it. But those are all of the books I read this month, so thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below, and I will see you next time.